Yes, Megan just joined.
Sean, are you there? You're on mute.
Sean's on mute, but that's okay.
I'm here. Sorry, I just got home.
Okay.
I was scarfing down dinner.
Oh, you can still go to work?
No, I had to go to the office to get some files.
Oh, okay.
All right, are we ready to go live?
We are.
I'm going to let in the public now.
Thank you. And there goes the participant count.
And Chris, you'll want to record.
And I will start recording.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. Call to order the March 23rd meeting of the Westford School Committee. Is there any public comment? Let's go through this again. Public comment is easiest if you use the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. If you would just put your first name so we know who's asking a question, and we will answer those probably as we go. I think most people just want to hear some updates now. As most people can see, the superintendent is not able to join us this evening, so I am going to jump to the assistant superintendent for a report.
Can someone mute, because I hear a lot of like echo.
I hear it as well.
Chris, can you mute everybody and only allow like one person speak?
I can't, as a rule, do that. I can individually mute people, but if everyone just mutes when they're not talking, I think that's probably just the best practice, and we'll go from there.
You have to unmute Avery.
Yep, I did. Go ahead, Carrie.
Over to me. So I don't have any updates outside of the updates that are on the agenda.
Okay.
Do you want me to move forward with that or hold on?
Well, let's just, does anybody have any subcommittee updates? I doubt that anything else is meeting right now. Okay. Ingrid, do you want to do finance now and then we'll go to the COVID update, or you want to do it as part of the COVID update?
It doesn't matter.
Go ahead now.
Carrie, does it matter?
I think it would dovetail nicely with the update that I'm providing.
Okay, perfect. Then go jump right into that, Carrie. Thanks.
All right. Well, I just want to let everybody know that, of course, we are around the clock closely monitoring the ever-changing status and guidance being offered as it relates to COVID-19. The superintendent, the central office staff, Jeff Stevens and his staff, along with people outside of the district, the Massachusetts Association of School Superintendents, along with DESE, we're all collaborating on a regular basis just to try to help sort through what we're doing now and what next steps need to occur. So we are in a bit of a dilemma because schools shut down on March 12th, as you all know, and we had to do a very fast turnaround, again, under sort of the guidance at the federal level as well as the state level, and that will continue to evolve as the situation evolves. So as you know, at the select board meeting on March 17th, they declared a local state of emergency for Westford, which follows suit with many other surrounding municipalities. And there are playgrounds are now closed, fields are closed, and that also pertains to the school playgrounds as well. So we've asked for signage to be placed on the school playgrounds, and we've asked principals when they are there to keep an eye on things. And from what I understand, people have been doing a great job with social distancing and making sure that they're staying away from situations where they could be passing along germs or touching things that others have recently touched. As I'm sure you are aware, today the governor instituted a stay-at-home advisory starting tomorrow at 12 o'clock. Not much will change from the school perspective because our schools have been closed and will continue to be closed. We are limiting the personnel who are able to enter the buildings. Paul Fox has come up with a procedure for deliveries so that we don't have delivery personnel going through the buildings to the different departments. And as a result, I think that from the building side of things, we are we have very safe actions in place and procedures in place. So we'll continue to do that. I would also like to just mention and thank Colleen Wallace, our food service director, and her amazing team who are putting themselves out there every day to provide lunch for some of the families in need. And it has been very successful. There was a lot of thoughtful planning in terms of logistically how the food is being prepped, how people will line up, keeping 6 feet away from one another, a single file line. Jim Antonelli was very helpful with identifying the side entrance. And you can see the picture on the screen that Avery just put up of the team. There's 5 staff on per day. The staff members, they come in their street clothes, they scrub in, so to speak, and that was provided. We seeked guidance from Jeff Stevens on what that scrub in process should look like. They change into their clean uniforms and shoes once they're inside. So on Thursday, which was the first day, we had 30 lunches served. On Friday, 22, and today there were 24 lunches served. Colleen's coordinating with principals to understand who may have transportation issues and then coming up with delivery options moving forward. Due to the stay-at-home advisory, we will have a shift in our process in that we'll be providing 1 week's worth of ingredients for folks who come in, and then they'll pick up a bag of the ingredients, and then they'll be making their own sandwiches at home for the rest of the week. And then that will repeat every Monday moving forward until the governor lifts the stay-at-home advisory. So a Blackboard message to families went home today, letting them know of this switch and asking for signups just to make sure that we're being most efficient with how many lunches we make for people. One of the big questions that has come up quite a bit is educating our students and what we're doing moving forward in terms of the education of our students. Choice boards were released this weekend and we received a lot of wonderful feedback, and I'd like to thank the staff, the curriculum coordinators, Julie Bedreau, the director of digital learning, along with Stephanie Goslin, one of the DLSs, who helped create these enrichment opportunities for students. There was digital conference after digital conference, and these people would get a text from me saying, "Can you meet right now?" And sure enough, they all pop on, and we just went back and forth throughout that planning process, and we're proud of those opportunities that are optional right now for students, and hope that families take advantage of those. While our current return date is April 7th, we believe there's a high likelihood that this closure could extend longer. So we've entered this new phase of future planning based on a long-term closure. There's nothing official yet, and technically everything is still under the assumption of April 7th, but of course we're continuing to plan in the case that that shift happens, similar to some other states throughout our nation. We're asking for people to bear with us during this planning process. While we understand that many families are anxiously awaiting for a formal virtual learning environment for students, we are a public school system and we have to account for all situations. This includes, but is not limited to, some of our students who are not yet proficient in the English language. Some of our special education students who cannot access the general education curriculum without certain supports, modification, and services. There's the digital divide that we know exists, and we hope to help mitigate. We also have situations that are unique to our current environment, which don't necessarily apply to school when school's in session normally, and that is not everybody has the luxury of an adult to sit home with them and facilitate that online learning. Probably less of an issue at the high school level, but certainly for elementary and some of middle school, there is the need for an adult support even if we provide those online options. We have situations where both parents, fortunately, are still able to go to work and they are not at home, and we have siblings watching siblings. And that is a full-time job in and of itself. And we've got to consider those families as well. We have children being shipped off to different locations, whether it be a friend's house or a family member's house. And the goal really is just somebody to watch the child for the sake of safety and just simply oversight, and that academics isn't, because it can't be a priority because there's nobody home to watch students. And then there's also the reality of some home environments that may not have been chaotic before have become chaotic and stressful for people. As I mentioned at the last school committee meeting, there are people who all of a sudden just lost their jobs. And that brings a whole host of issues and difficulty within families. We also have our staff members who are not necessarily set up for virtual learning, and we have to consider that as well. They too have been sent home and may not have all of the tools yet that they need to create these virtual environments for students. And they're also home having to manage their own children and having to, in this case, support their children in their virtual learning too. So there's also that balance too that we just can't ignore and pretend that it doesn't exist. So not considering all of these situations would sort of exacerbate the achievement gap that currently exists that we have been working diligently to try to close. So we are required, and we simply want to make sure that we have some sort of process in place that accounts for all of these types of situations to the best that we can. That said, we do think that March 12th is not an appropriate end of school date. So we are planning on what April 7th might look like, and through to the end of the year or a later date if the closure is simply delayed. And we have weekly meetings with the Commissioner of Education, which most recently occurred on Friday. And then this morning we had a virtual meeting with 35 area superintendents and assistant superintendents to process the information and collaborate on next steps, because we're all in the same situation. Please know that there are proper steps that have to be made in order to make any sort of next step successful. And it is critical that we follow these steps thoughtfully, even though there might be people at home feeling a sense of urgency because their own structure may lend itself nicely for a virtual learning environment for their particular child or children. The original expectation for the optional choice boards will still remain through April 6th, and then we will communicate our next steps once they have been thoroughly created and determined. And we assure you that we will have adequate advance notice for people to properly get set up. Obviously, we have to work with administrators as well as with the union to understand what those next steps might entail, all of the details around those. So that's what we're starting to do now. And we don't have answers of what that will look like, but we do, as I mentioned, think that March 12th would not be the most ideal last day of school. So keeping in mind, we're in the middle of a pandemic that's beyond our control, and we've got to practice patience over perfection. I keep telling the staff that, the administrators that, and I just ask parents to keep that in mind as well. So in terms of testing, you may have heard last Friday, the president had waived the standardized testing requirements, which for Massachusetts, that's the MCAS. Again, right now, we're officially going under the assumption that our return date is April 7th. We know that that could change, but in the meantime, the MCAS testing window has shifted to the end of May. But because those testing requirements have been waived, that there's some flexibility in the case that if we were ever in a situation where we don't return to school until the end of the year, then there may be a case where we just don't offer MCAS at all, or do something creative for the high school MCAS because that is a graduation requirement, or if we cancel MCAS altogether, what that would look like, because if sophomores who take MCAS still have their junior year and senior year to retake. So we may just rely on retakes, or that particular class may be waived. Those types of details have not been sorted out at the state level yet. We also have AP exams, and obviously they have typically in the past been given in school, and that won't be possible this year. So the College Board has modified its schedule and the model. The exams will be taken at home by students, and they feel as though they have proper procedures in place to be able to track for plagiarism, things of that nature. The content will focus on subject matter that most schools were able to complete by the end of March. And there'll be 2 testing dates per subject for students. Students will have the opportunity, as I mentioned, to take the exam at home. And colleges are completely on board with the solution, and they're committed to ensuring that the AP students receive the credit that they've worked hard to earn. And then lastly, I just want to share that there's been some conversation, certainly with school committee members, there's been question about paying our employees. And Bill and the rest of the central office team would like to continue keeping our employees on payroll. And that is our recommendation to all of you tonight. We've created guidance for employees to for an alternative work solution so that they can still be contributing to moving our school district forward, but it would be in a very different way than their typical tasks if they were there during the school day. But Ingrid has done a terrific job sorting out what the implications of that, because while we do believe in that and we do want to support our staff and we do want to have them back when this situation lifts, we also have to make sure that it's something that's feasible for the district and for our budget. So I'm at this point now going to turn it over to Ingrid, who can provide you with some details.
Sorry, had to unmute. As Carrie said, I mean, we value the staff, and we absolutely feel that everyone plays a vital role in the success of the district. So in light of that, it's definitely my recommendation, and I think the entire administration's recommendation, that we honor our commitment to our staff and continue to pay the regular base wages and salaries throughout the closure and through the end of the school year. I really just think we're all experiencing so many external anxieties. If that's one anxiety that we can relieve from our staff, who we value, and as Carrie said, everyone has worked very hard to identify remote tasks and roles that all of our staff can do to continue to support our students. As you know, the majority of our staff are paid from the general fund budget. We spent plenty of time on our FY21 budget in the last few months, so I think everyone's aware of that. In addition, we pay over almost 100 salaries out of other funds, grants, and our revolving funds. So with this closure, we will experience a significant drop in revenue in our revolving funds. Our kindergarten programs will lose approximately $240,000 in tuition. Preschool, about $80,000 in tuition. The athletics revolving account generally in the spring season takes in another $200,000 in athletic fees. In general, from this period, March to the end of the year, the food service revolving account would collect about $480,000 for school lunches. And the food service revolving account covers all 50 of our cafeteria workers. Fortunately, we do have healthy balances right now, and through some savings of, not purchasing supplies. I know food service had looked to their account to potentially make some capital purchases. We might have to hold off on that, but we really feel strongly that it is important and a priority to pay our staff. So that said, I believe that all our revolving fund balances will cover the salaries through the end of the year. There's one exception, which is the preschool revolving account. With my projection, I think that might come up about a $68,000 deficit. In order to cover that deficit, we've moved those salaries that are hitting the preschool account into the budget. During the shutdown, we'll most likely realize some savings, energy savings, supply savings, contracted service savings, savings, all that, obviously we'd rather have our kids in school, but some of those savings should be able to cover that deficit and absorb those, help the budget absorb the salaries. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Any questions from the?
I had one. Ingrid, how will the shutdown affect our busing and our contract with the bus?
So as Carrie mentioned, I think last week didn't even count the hours that we were on statewide conference calls with our colleagues. Pretty much every district's in the same boat, looking to pay staff and looking to pay our vendors. Like we have with D-Bus, it's a very close relationship, long-standing relationship. We hope that school opens sooner than later, and that we will need our bus company ready to go. That said, D is asking that we honor our contract. In many of our conferences, it's been identified that state law precludes us from paying our vendors if services aren't rendered. The legislature is aware of this issue. The governor is aware of this issue. Jody has a conference call. Jody Ross, our town manager, has a conference call with the assistant or the lieutenant governor and other town managers tomorrow. She's aware of this issue and is going to bring it up. So we need the law or some flexibility in the regulation to change so that we can legally pay for services that we don't receive. I'm in communication with Dee and will continue to discuss how we can make this happen. We need to understand their costs and how they are operating themselves, that we are working together to cover that. The commissioner at the Department of Education has promised some guidance later in the week to help all of our districts with this. So that issue is still kind of a work in progress, but it's high priority for every district in the Commonwealth.
Okay, thank you. And I just wanted I had a comment, I guess, on really what Carrie laid out and the planning and just looking both where we're at now and going forward. And I just want to thank you for the health and wellness first attitude I think that you've taken and the thoughtfulness. I'm glad we didn't rush into anything at this point. I'm glad we're looking at options for post April 7th. But I think you said it. It's a time of uncertainty. We have families grappling with uncertainty about work, uncertainty about health, uncertainty about childcare. And I'm speaking for myself when I say last week, the thought of us like ramping up into some sort of a full remote distance learning situation, I think for so many families would have been really hard last week. So again, just my appreciation. I hope people, I think people probably have an appreciation of that generally, that we are looking out for every family and every student, and at the same time looking at what it looks like if it goes past April 7th.
Thank you.
Megan, you had a question?
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. Two quick questions. So Ingrid, you mentioned, I had the bus question, so thank you for answering that so thoroughly and paying close attention to that. You mentioned the deficit with the kindergarten revolving
preschool.
Oh, I thought you said there was 240,000 from kindergarten during your rundown.
Yes, that's lost revenue, but we have enough balances to cover the salary.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify for the public. Is that lost revenue because it's billed in installments for those families that pay for full day kindergarten and they have yet to be billed for this portion of the school year?
True. Well, some have already paid. And again, that's a discussion. Obviously, I'd look for guidance for you. My recommendation was that as long as we don't have school, we shouldn't charge tuition. The families that have already paid, if you agree, we would issue refunds. At this point, we hope that school would reopen. So I'd probably hold off from issuing refunds immediately, but I think, again, that's something for you all to discuss, but I think my recommendation would be that we don't charge tuition while we're closed.
Okay, I guess I would look to you for guidance on that. I have heard from other, through the MASC board, through other districts that are facing those same challenges. As we know, free full day kindergarten is not necessarily common around here. Most communities do have paid programs. But I think what is unique about that is that they are supporting full-time teacher salaries, those payments. And so while I certainly don't want to penalize families, I also think that comes at a very large cost to the district overall. And it's unique in that, everybody, I guess obviously that's more money and they're not receiving that instruction, but we're not also offering, I would assume, we're not offering partial refunds to those families who have paid activity fees for the year or instrument fees for the year, and they're now not getting that instruction. So
again, that's up to you all. The projected payroll for full day kindergarten is almost $200,000 to the end of the year.
Right. I guess I would urge committee members, I think it's a larger discussion, and it's difficult in that regard for the kindergarten thing because it is a lot of money and sort of insult to injury, certainly during this time when families are strapped, to say, we're going to bill you anyway and you're not accessing school. And I completely understand and support that. I don't have a position one way or the other. I just think it's a big decision. You could also have families argue that they would like, a portion of their school or of their bus fee refunded because they're not getting on the bus. I think it's a sort of a large can of worms when you look at it that way. But the difference, of course, there is we know bus fees don't even come close to fully supporting the cost of our transportation, whereas our kindergarten teaching positions for those full day classrooms are supported by those fees. So I think that's an interesting issue. And
I'd be happy to look at that a little closer and bring you a recommendation the next meeting.
Okay. No, that's okay. And then my other question with regards to paying staff is, again, just a clarification. So obviously we, as Carrie said, hope for the 7th of a return date, but know that it's likely much longer and that certainly there's a possibility that we don't return to school at all this year. As far as teacher stipends for activities, sports, things that are not happening, is that clear that within the contracts that those are not paid if they don't occur?
Megan, I apologize. My internet was blinking and it said all of a sudden my internet was unstable. Do you mind repeating your question?
No, I was just, not at all. I was asking about stipends for teachers for activities or sports coaching or things that they do outside of, if those have not occurred yet, is it understood that those just don't get paid?
I think at this point, let's see where we are at the end of the season or the period, the spring period.
Okay.
I think it's too early to know what we're doing with those. The stipends and the coaching stipends are generally supported by the activity fees and the student athletics fee.
Okay.
Would it make sense for a future meeting to have maybe a list of things that would be under consideration like that we would want to look at individually?
Yeah, so I would suggest the tuition should be a discussion item, and I'm happy to research more and provide more information, as well as the stipends and coaching.
Other questions from the committee? Go ahead. Unmute.
Okay, yeah, let me unmute. So to follow up a little bit on Megan's question, I think this is like happening everywhere where people say whether they need to have a refund or not have a refund. And then for our school system, it's like where the money is coming from. I just hope that maybe in a couple of days, we have more clear idea about what kind of like rescue package we're going to get either from the federal government or from the state government. Well, maybe we can actually claim some money or get some assistance from. I think it's too early for us to know what's exactly going to happen or if we can actually claim any money to cover our losses. So maybe we can actually talk about this in a much later time when things are like more clear. But we can actually talk about like paying our hourly staff first, those commitments we're going to make. So we can actually talk about paying our employees first. And then later on, we can talk about like how we're going to figure out where the money is coming from, if we're going to do any refunds.
Agreed.
That's one thing. The other thing, I really appreciate that Carrie and Ingrid, you guys are spending a lot of time for all the problems which we're facing, which Carrie listed. And then it's high likelihood that we're not going to be able to return back to school. So
we don't know that yet.
Wow. So from today till like April 6th, what concrete steps the district is taking to resolve all the issues Carrie mentioned about the inequalities or all those hurdles which our staff, some of our members of our community and some of our students are facing, which if we cannot open our school beyond April 6th and then we have to go virtual, what concrete steps the district is taking to make sure those issues are mitigated or resolved?
Yeah, so our goal is to provide some high quality instruction on new material from now until the end of the year in some capacity that provides enough flexibility for certainly the teachers who, as I mentioned before, are in a kind of wonky situation at home with children at home and a varying level of technology skills. And we, in terms of the students and families, we think the more flexibility, the better. So we would like to have some sort of setup where there are these particular options, instructional videos that students access, office hours potentially for teachers where there's that individual opportunity to interact with for students to have that interaction with their teachers on a face-to-face, more individualized level. It could be one-on-one, it could be small group. We could have potentially special education teachers doing something similar with the students whom they service, ELL teachers as well. But I really can't get into much more than that because it's in the brainstorming stage and I don't want to start rumors. It has not been anything yet that we've talked at length with the union, but we just, and same with our approach to the choice boards, we want to make sure that it makes sense and that we're not establishing requirements that are not feasible for people or for many of the people. So there's no concrete answer, and that is a very uncomfortable space to be moving through, knowing that the clock is ticking and we have to get this rolling, hopefully as early as April 7th or sometime shortly after that. But we've got to get a lot of people on board. We've got about just under 5,000 students, hundreds of staff members, and we want to understand how each person could be plugged into some model to make this manageable for all parties. So that's a very vague answer, and I know that, but those are the types of things that.
Can we go back to the finances before we shoot off too many other directions? Does anybody else have questions about Ingrid's finance statement and the getting the employees and all the staff paid? And then let's jump to the distance learning, because I think we're going to get some more public questions on distance learning. Lori, you had a question. Is it finance or distance learning related?
It was actually kind of both. And I think I was almost thinking about it in terms of really tying the two things together. I think, and thank you to Carrie and Ingrid for the valuable updates, and of course to all of the administrators and teachers and staff members who were involved in creating the choice boards and in trying to figure out kind of the logistics of how our school district is going to continue to operate in these very strange times. I think the priority in terms of both student learning and in terms of our staff, and this is why I feel like they're linked, is for us to remain flexible and remain ready to return to school if that's possible. So I think that is a great feature to the choice boards. And if families haven't had a chance to peruse those, I encourage them to go in and look for families who are looking for options and for students who are kind of craving that connection to school. I think there's a lot of good activities in the choice boards that can really keep students in that school mode and keep them in a mind frame of being ready to learn, so that if we are able to return to school, that those students will be ready to re-engage with their learning experience. And for students who may be under difficult circumstances at home and they may not have an opportunity to spend a lot of time on those choice boards, that's also okay. That's because they're choice boards. So I think Carrie said it best when she talked about flexibility and options. We need to give students who are trying to engage with learning, because that will help them fill this uncertain time at home. We want to give them the option to do so. But for students who may not be ready for that, or are in a home circumstance that they cannot access that learning, that they're not required to do so, and they shouldn't feel any sort of pressure to engage in that if that's not what's going to work best for their family. In the same token, and this is where they're kind of linked in my mind, I think we want our staff to be ready to re-engage with school when hopefully we will be able to reopen, even if we're not sure when that is. So of course, I do want to support continuing to paying our staff members, to keep our staff members in, whether they are professional staff members or hourly staff members, keep them in stable circumstances, so that when we are ready to re-engage more actively in our school system, that they're ready and able to do so as well. So I think that's why it is such an important priority to continue paying all of our staff. And I appreciate all of the information from Ingrid about kind of what the financial implications of that could be. I think, well, there is certainly a cost to continuing to pay staff members when we might not have certain revenues coming in this spring. There are also some offsetting savings. As Ingrid mentioned, we're not paying for the same degree of electricity or heat in our buildings right now. So, so that kind of offset hopefully can help us weather the cost of continuing to pay these salaries. But I think it's vital that we do so that when and if we are ready to re-engage with school, that our students are ready to do so and our staff is ready to do so as well.
Okay. Any other committee questions? And then I've posted in the notes to the panelists a motion that I need someone to make to support Ingrid's recommendation. Does anybody else have questions? Let's do that first. on the salary payments. I just want to get through this part first before we get pulled off. Okay, so the Westford School Committee approves paying regular base salaries and wages to our salaried and hourly employees during the current emergency school closure or through the end of the year, depending on how long the closure goes.
So moved.
Any
Second.
comments to that? Okay, so for a vote, I need a roll call. Chris?
Aye.
Ming Chen?
Aye.
Gloria?
Aye.
Alicia?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
Megan?
Aye.
Okay, so that's unanimous to paying regular base salaries and wages to our salaried and hourly employees. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to make sure we got that one covered because I know we needed a motion on that.
Great, thanks.
Now, are there other questions from the panelists and on the COVID update before we go to policy? I know we do have some questions from the public on these questions.
Avery, are you wanting to let the public speak to the issue of payment first, or are you moving back to distance learning? Because I see some questions about that from the public.
And that's what I was just reading through some of the questions on you see distance learning questions, or I see the payment questions, but I haven't seen.
Well, I saw from somebody to speak, and I don't know if the public can even, if that's even possible during public forum. Do they have the ability to speak to a microphone?
There may be a way to do it, but we haven't for this meeting. We're going to stick with the Q&A box. There might be a way to promote people and let them speak, but we haven't tested it and we haven't announced that, so we're going to stick with the Q&A box, I think, for this meeting.
Okay.
And I did see a question about, I think it's a question about distance learning. Well, it was a question from Eileen about making, if there's a date by which we'll make a go back or don't go back decision, or if that's a state question. And then the question I was going to ask Carrie is if she could talk about any collaboration we have with other districts on getting through this, especially with distance learning, and how, whether that or not that's helpful, and how those discussions go.
Yes, I have a group chat of, there's 8 of us in surrounding areas that are currently in the brainstorming session of how we're going to do this. So are you talking about collaborating with other districts in terms of creating a plan for next steps, Chris?
Right.
Yes, and it feels important that we stay in lockstep to the best of our ability. But when we were speaking with the superintendents and assistant superintendents, there were about 35 of us this morning on a virtual conference call. We did acknowledge the fact that what may work for some districts, depending on their clientele, may not fly with other districts. And I think this morning was the first time that we had talked about the fact that there could be some people wanting to stick with choice board options moving forward, and we felt as though that there needs to be some more kind of explicit delivery of material that might be missed. And it may not be every single bit of what they would learn, students would learn 6 hours throughout the day, but when we're prioritizing, and I think I mentioned this last time, when we're prioritizing what should be taught, it's 3 criteria, and that is what is helpful for people to know in the next grade level. It is what is helpful for people to know on testing, standardized testing, because it's just a harsh reality. And then what is helpful for students to know in life. And sometimes there are these sort of discrete standards that have a spot and we understand why they're there, but really it's one of those things where students say, is this truly useful? And why do we need to know that? So using those sort of that three-pronged approach, I think we would in Westford want to identify what skills and content is necessary moving forward. And there were districts that are similar to ours that were very much on the same page. And it was great because this particular session did show that there were areas where we were splintered as a group, which actually this is the first time we got there. And we'll continue to work together to be as consistent as possible, but also within the context of each of our communities and the values. We do have more guidance coming, I think tomorrow, from the commissioner, because the Billerica superintendent, Tim Pavover, who's a Westford resident, he was on a noontime call with MASS, MASC, MTA, and AFT, and they are going to kind of create some sort of MOU altogether and guidance to send out to districts. So at least we'll all have a consistent framework and throughout the state. And then we'll be able to sort of fill in the blanks of that framework as it pertains to our individual communities. But there's a lot of collaboration. We are not doing this in isolation. And it's been so helpful to share because we can just hijack templates from one another, some language from one another. And it's been the most, there is a silver lining to all of this. And it is that we have to lean on each other more than ever within the district and beyond the district. And that has been a true pleasure. And then I hope this almost paves the way that we don't have to stop doing these virtual meetings if we can do them every 2 weeks or every month with the same group of individuals. It's been so valuable, and it doesn't have to just be because of COVID-19.
Megan?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Carrie. I just had a quick question in terms of you sort of talked about, collaborating with different districts and staff. Something I have heard anecdotally from parents, and I'm sure many of us have seen online sprinkled throughout Facebook, is wonderful videos or outreach or connection that has come willingly and in different formats from all kinds of administrators and teachers at our various schools. So first, I just want to say thank you, because I think just the connection and our kiddos being able to see, even if they are not necessarily their classroom teacher, but maybe a principal they had that read a book, or I know there's been all kinds of experimentation. Last night, for example, one of the strings teachers I know tried a Zoom sort of class so he could play an instrument with his kiddos and just connect and say hello. My question is, as some of those things start to happen, I think simply because the teachers want to reach out to their students as much as those students want to reach out to their teachers. I know there have been conversations about, oh, well, I heard from mine, but you didn't hear from yours, or I heard from my 4th grade teacher, but not from my 2nd grade teacher. And first, I just want to acknowledge that all of these teachers are, in many cases, also parents that are dealing with their own, as you said, home situations. And of course, we're turning to them for guidance with our own kids in education. But is anything coming sort of from administration or from the principals, either encouraging the teachers or giving them guidance as to the best ways and the methods and how they should be going about reaching out to their students? Or flip it the other way, if particular students are really craving that, is there a way that the district would encourage families to reach out the other way to say, we're really hoping to hear from you, or we'd love to see a morning message, or we're hoping to connect this way?
Yes, I think that is something that is so incredibly important, and probably most important is that social emotional piece. And when students see creative ways that teachers are reaching out to them, I think it provides a level of normalcy, even though there's no normalcy right now that exists. So I have heard about some of the inconsistencies, and one was actually pointed out to me today from some area elementary school teachers at one school and not other schools. And is there something the teachers at the other school are feeling pressure. So is it something that we should speak to the first school about? And my answer to that is no, I don't want to regulate that. I don't want to require any consistency, but we did provide guidance to teachers, and we said, do something to connect to your students, whether it be just a motivational message, some sort of read aloud. So that layer of staying connected with the kids is in there, and how teachers interpret that does vary from teacher to teacher. And I think over time that could grow if teachers are hearing some cool ideas from other teachers and what they did, and they can figure out if that fits within their world and ability. But I just think that this will start to grow, and I don't want to get too caught up in comparing what one teacher's doing over the other. As a matter of fact, I had teachers here in Billerica doing drive-bys for their students, and the Billerica Moms page was blowing up with teachers, pictures of the teachers, from the parents out the window of their homes, and the teachers driving by and the kids just waving just to visually see them. And my child's teacher didn't participate, but I could still appreciate, or she's doing other things, but I could appreciate the fact that what a cool thing for those kids. And I wouldn't want to prevent that from happening, because certainly not everybody can do that. But at the same time, that may catch on in some way, and another teacher, even if it's just one or two other teachers, may do that as well. So we're not going to provide a set of guidelines on that. We just want to encourage, to the best of everybody's ability, to try to do something to make those connections, the kind of non-academic piece, just to show them that we still love them and care about them and miss them very much.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, anybody else have a question? There's a couple questions I was going to try to field from the Q&A list. Carrie, one of the questions you might see is, what percentage of students can't access education through online distance learning? Do we have a rough number of the percentage of kids? I know that's a hard one to...
we do have it. I don't know it off the top of my head. There have been some families who have reached out, and we are setting them up with a Chromebook at home, and with the Comcast offering 60 days of free Wi-Fi for the people who don't have internet, guiding them on how to access that. One of the obstacles is if we did, shift to anything more sort of distance virtual schooling type of scenario in some fashion moving forward, I think that we may have to increase the amount of students that we have to support with devices, because right now the criteria is, if you don't have one in your household, then you're welcome to come in and we'll provide you one. And the reason that exists, we know that there are families with multiple siblings. However, the way the choice boards are currently structured, it doesn't have to be hours at a time. It certainly doesn't have to be everybody on at the same time. So because we don't have the capacity just to distribute free devices to everybody, we did want to limit it to what was realistic. So if we did something a little bit more than that after April 7th, then we would anticipate getting more requests for that, and we'll have to prepare for that.
So we have two more questions that seem to be, one is distance learning, and one, because you can't replicate a classroom learning environment at home, you can't really teach a new material. Can we reinforce previously taught material? Would that be considered equitable for all students?
Mm-hmm. That is a terrific question, and that's actually one of the areas that was split in this morning's superintendent meeting. And some felt as though, let's take the opportunity to go deeper, and some felt as though we've got to continue moving forward with new content. So we will continue to evaluate that. I think my concern about not exposing students to new content is that come the next grade level, obviously teachers will be aware, the fourth grade teacher will know that the third grade did not have their spring learning. They didn't have the opportunity for that, so could adjust accordingly. But I would just be a little bit concerned about what gaps there would appear to be if we didn't move forward, and might that then lead to some additional perceived need of tier 2 interventions for math intervention, reading intervention, when in fact it's just a lack of exposure. We would obviously, if we did go in that direction, work with teachers to be able to adjust their thinking of what students enter fourth grade with, and that may be a little bit different for this upcoming year and how to adapt for that. So that's one of the things that is up in the air. However, I do think virtually, when done correctly, I think that if we prioritize content, we would be able to continue to make steps forward in that direction.
Right. And the other question is actually from a physician here in town who is actively treating COVID patients. So he knows how real it is. And he's concerned that if we don't take action now in teaching and learning, and not just what he's calling busy work with the choice boards, if we could get 90% of them up and running now, we'll tackle the problems of access, computers, IEPs, et cetera. We can't wait until everything is lined up as being described. How soon do we think we would launch actual virtual learning? It looks like New York City's doing it. Some other communities in Mass are doing it. Is there an obstacle to us starting, or are we just waiting for guidance?
Well, we are waiting for guidance too, but we're not just waiting in limbo. We absolutely are planning ahead. It's important that we do this thoughtfully. And I know that our timeline is not going to match people who feel as though, every minute counts. I do think that, we are committed at this point through April 6th to keep things as is. And my hope is that any pivot we have to make could happen either April 7th or shortly after that. I do want to just keep in perspective, there have been schools previously that have been shut down for a period of time due to, it might be facility issues. And in the broad scheme of things, we know how important education is. But 2 or 3 weeks is not going to be detrimental long-term to these students. Right now, these students need TLC. They need to understand and adjust to their new normal of just simply being home. They will continue learning. I've had families say, thank you so very much for allowing us time to adjust and not pressuring us, feeling like, oh my gosh, on top of figuring all of this out, we've got to school our kids now too. So while I understand that perspective and am very sensitive to that person and the people who feel similarly, and there are several, we've had several emails, there's also the others that say, thank goodness, because we couldn't do it. And my household being one of them, with everything that we have to do to address this, I would not be able to virtually support my child's virtual learning at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Questions from the committee on those?
Thank you for saying that, Carrie, and thank you for reinforcing that these 3 weeks aren't going to have a long-term detrimental impact. I do think it's worth remembering and reminding of that. So, thanks.
Gloria, I think you had your hand up. I love that.
I was going to echo that as well. I feel like we have gotten a lot of feedback from the community. Some of it has been at one extreme of, we must start distance learning tomorrow, time is being lost. And then at the other extreme, thank you for not, creating anything that was mandatory that has to be instituted tomorrow. My family's not at a place where we can do that yet, and they appreciate having the flexibility. So I very much appreciate that the district has taken a balanced and thoughtful approach to this, and We are also looking for guidance from the state and looking to what other districts are doing, but we're also taking our time, and that if we do implement some type of virtual distance learning, that we do so in a thoughtful manner that makes it accessible to all of our students. And the last thing I guess I will add to parents who are really anxious about this idea of lost time, just from a personal perspective, I have older students. I have 2 kids who are in college, and education is a marathon, not a sprint. So there is no need to panic or worry about a couple of weeks in your child's education. It is a long game, and I think a little bit of patience and a little bit of just encouraging students to stay connected to learning in whatever way makes sense for them. If your child is interested in computers and has never had a chance to learn a computer language, use some of this extra time to learn a computer language if they're able to do so. If you have a student who, really loves to write their own poems, give them access to read more poetry and explore a passion. Use this time in a way that makes sense for your child and makes sense for your family, but don't feel like that your child is somehow falling behind in some kind of race. Education's not a race. Everyone is in the same boat here. This is an extreme situation that all districts are facing and the communities are facing across the state and the country. So please just send positive messages to your kids in terms of how they can stay connected to their learning, and not let them absorb the anxiety that because school is out, that therefore they are, quote, missing something or falling behind. I don't think that's a message we want to send to our students, and it isn't going to put them in a position that's going to help them be ready to learn once we are able to return to school.
Other comments from the committee? Carrie, did you have something? I saw you. Did you raise your hand? No? Okay. Okay. Let me just make sure that we've answered questions. So it's, yeah, I think the question, the parent asking the questions just wants to be sure that we are looking ahead past April 7th and that we're starting to make those plans now, even though we don't know what the plan is or what it's going to look like, but that we're keeping the eye forward. I know a lot of this time has been spent on the present and sort of putting all of the things together for the immediate, but at some point we'll have to switch a little bit of gears to a future look too. And I think I appreciate that the central administration can do that balance, because that's not an easy balance to do.
Thank you.
All right, so if there aren't more questions, I think we are ready to move ahead to policies. I believe we're not at a second reading yet because we're still in comment period, but I believe there's an update on the disposal. Is that Gloria going to handle that, or?
Alicia, did you want to take this since you found the comments?
Sure. So for the 3 policies that are for the tiered focus management review, there was only one comment, and it was a thank you for making this policy happen. So those are all pretty much in a holding pattern. The other, sorry, let me pull the comment. The only other comment was, we have a comment from Christy Bates, thank you. She said in the 4th bullet, it reads, quote, donation sale. And she asked, what is a donation sale? The previous bullet reads donation or sale. Might the or be missing? So that policy is actually Gloria's policy. Well, Gloria's taking lead on it. So Gloria, if you'd like to address that.
And yes, thank you for catching that typo. I can always count on certain intrepid members of the public to catch my typos. Yes, that bullet should read donation or sale. So when we do put this policy up for a second read, which would be, if I've got the time straight right, that would be 2 weeks from tonight at our meeting, that we would be able to vote on this policy with that typographical error fixed. So thank you for catching that. We are still in the public comment period for all 4 of these policies on our agenda tonight. So if any members of the public do have comments on these policies, they can still access the district website and fill out a comment through the online form, or they can also just email either myself or Alicia or Megan. The 3 of us compose the policy subcommittee, so feel free to email one of us if you have any questions or concerns about these policies. They are still in the public comment period, and we would be voting on them 2 weeks from tonight.
Can you tell me when the public period ends? Do we have a date? I wanted to say it was the end of this week.
I would have to double check that date with Nina. That sounds correct.
That I think it is the end of this week, but I would have to check it as well.
Okay. All right. And after that public comment, we can move ahead with it. Yep. Who said my name?
Quick comment on the emailing. Yes, you can absolutely email us. However, it was pointed out, and I did send an email to my Wells, that my email address is incorrect on the district webpage. I believe it's missing the K-12 or missing the K or the 12, one of the two. So all of the email addresses should end the same. You can still get to me if you use email and then the rest of the correct email address. And I know Mike is super busy right now, but I just wanted to mention that as well.
And I would encourage using the web form just because it keeps it in one place, all the comments in one place for future references.
Okay, so no other questions or comments on that. We will wait and vote on that at our in 2 weeks. Okay, thank you. We are still going to address, I hope, the school calendar, Carrie.
Yes, so in your packet, you got the draft of next year's school calendar, and not quite so straightforward compared to typical years, and much of that due to the fact that Labor Day starts, or Labor Day is on September 7th, which is significantly later than normal. So for the most part, number of early release days, number of full day professional development days, that was all rolled over and in sync, not necessarily the location of them on the calendar, but conferences, those were essentially the same week that they were this year, just rolled over to whatever equivalent date that was next year. But some things I just want to share. This draft was reviewed by 2 members of the Diversity and Inclusion Committee, Jenny Kravitz as well as Shoshana Perry, the rabbi that is often consulted, also with the WEA officers and administrators as well. So a couple of things to bring your attention to in this. As I mentioned, Labor Day is the 7th, and the teacher's contract reads that they start the Monday prior to the Labor Day, the week of Labor Day, before Labor Day. So that would be August 31st. So the kind of unusual thing here is that if teachers start on the 31st, we do have a no school day on September 1st because we have 3 voting sessions in town next year instead of 2. So that means students could not return the way we currently have it structured, where I think this year or maybe the end of last year was the first time we have decided to close schools whenever there's voting. So September 1st would not be a school day, in which case students would start on Wednesday, the first tier of students, and then the second tier of students which are the 7th and 8th grade, along with the 10th through 12th graders, would start on Tuesday, the 3rd. So it kind of bumps everything out by a day with that weird September 1st no school day. And so as a result, for those students coming, the 7 and 8, along with the 10 through 12 students coming on Thursday, we didn't want to have them come for one day and then have a 4-day weekend. So we ended up adding a school day on Friday, the 4th, which usually we have off and people have a 4-day Labor Day weekend. In this case, they would only have a 3-day. The recommendation from the WEA would be, for families who tend to take that 4-day weekend, could we just do an early release day? So the way the calendar, we took that suggestion. So the way the calendar currently stands, there's a half day on the 4th, that Friday, instead of no school. So we also have professional development days are typically adjacent to the Columbus Day weekend in October. So that's a long weekend where students have the Monday off. And then that Tuesday, students have off too, typically, because that's when we do professional development. And again, typically we have our second and final full professional development day in January, and that abuts the Martin Luther King Jr. Day in that long weekend. So that too is typically a 4-day weekend. Didn't happen this year for other reasons, but for voting again. But both of those days, which is typical for us, would have to be shifted again because of voting. So what would typically be the Columbus Day weekend extension for students, that Tuesday professional development day has now been pushed to November 3rd because that's a presidential election. And we know that will be a very busy time. So we have shifted that. And then the second full PD day that usually is after the Martin Luther King Day is now in May due to the 3rd election in the school year. So those 4-day weekends from the student and family perspective are now 3-day weekends, and that other day is sprinkled strategically on the voting days during the remainder of the year. We did consider starting 2 weeks prior to Labor Day, but it is a collective bargaining issue, and the language is very explicit in the contract that teachers start the week prior to and not 2 weeks prior to. We do understand that this is concerning if there is the case where March 12th is the last day of school for the year, and then students have, in terms of not going into the brick and mortar buildings from now until September 2nd off, it is a little bit concerning, and we will do our best from now until the end of the year to keep students connected. But at this juncture, this is where the calendar that we're proposing.
Questions from the committee? Yep, Megan, go ahead.
So thank you for that explanation, Carrie. Carrie knows this, as I sent some concerns to Bill and Carrie asking for details around contract language, given that we are currently in collective bargaining for a new contract, but this is longstanding language about the week before. And of course that I think we would all agree that we're in very unusual circumstances in life in general right now. This is so unexpected. We don't know if we will return to school or when. And then additionally, that September 7th for Labor Day is so late, and that the 3 years of this next union contract encompass the 7th, 6th, and 5th as Labor Day dates. So it will be a little later than we typically go back for the next 3 years. So I had asked Carrie and Bill those questions. And so thank you for the answers to those. So I guess one question I was curious, just in terms of area districts, DESE, market basket districts, what choices were being made just given the date of Labor Day, without really diving deep, certainly into their own teacher contracts, as those are unique. And it was a bit of a mixed bag, but for the most part, I would say most people are returning on Monday, August 31st. And of course, as Carrie pointed out, we have that unique issue that we as a school committee unanimously supported the idea that we not attend school on voting days because so many of our schools are voting precincts. So I guess my question would be, knowing that we are bound by this contract language and that August 31st is a reasonable first day of school and certainly in line with what many other districts are doing, is do we reach out potentially to the town clerk and to the League of Women Voters again and ask for any guidance of the possibility, not necessarily for the presidential election, as we know that will have a huge turnout, but for the state primary on the 1st, is there a potential to move those voting precincts out of our schools to other locations so that we could attend school that day and start on Monday the 31st to have that uninterrupted week of school? I don't know the answer to that. I was going to reach out. Carrie, I don't know if you have any insight into that, but I think that that is a conversation that would be helpful to have very clear answers to, as we have this unique problem where we don't, for safety reasons, want to have voting in the schools. And yet this poses a real issue with our calendar, with Labor Day being so late and having some continuity, especially if we end up in the position where March 12th was the last day of school. I did get some emails just from posting this agenda without even saying any of that, that people are, no, I don't want to go back any earlier because of already made vacation plans. I certainly understand that. And I would just like everybody to acknowledge that just with any issue, whether it's what we just discussed with distance learning or anything else, there are always opposite ends of the spectrum. So as Carrie already alluded to, we have, all kinds of students here in Westford. And for many of these students, being at home is maybe not best, best for them, and returning to a structured school environment sooner rather than later is best. So if we could explore that about the voting day on the 1st, that would be my question.
Megan, I think that coming up with some sort of workaround, if possible, for that September 1st voting day would be ideal. I don't know what that entails, shifting voting sites, or if there's something that we can do in terms of foot traffic differently in schools, where it may be a lesser turnout type of voting day. I think that it's something that we can definitely explore. I don't know how comfortable you all feel voting on the calendar tonight and then amending that vote. I understand that probably at this point, the eagerness to get the calendar out there is so that people can begin planning which days they come back. So if that's the piece that may or may not change, I don't know if you're hesitant on making that vote, knowing that there could be some shift if there's a workaround with that September 1st date, but that would be my recommendation.
Gloria?
I think Megan raises a number of good issues, and Carrie, I appreciate the explanation of all of the kind of unique factors that go into making this year's calendar complicated. The fact that there are 3 election days during this calendar, during the school calendar, makes it unique. The fact that Labor Day is late makes it unique. So there were definitely some unique challenges in the formulation of this calendar. Megan's also raised, potential discussions we could have with the town clerk. There's also potential conversations that could be had with the union. We're in the middle of a collective bargaining cycle, and I absolutely want to respect that process. But I wonder if, in light of all of the unique challenges of this calendar, and how it might impact, especially in our current uncertain situation with the remainder of the school year, if administration is comfortable with us holding off and not voting on this immediately tonight, and maybe considering this a draft calendar for another week or two, I know the public is probably anxious to get a final calendar, but there are so many uncertainties and unique challenges with this calendar. I think it would be my preference to maybe hold off and consider this a draft and kind of explore some more of those issues that Megan has raised.
As some of you can see, Mr. Middlemiss has reminded us that there's a potential state holiday, September 14th, which is the new marathon day. So I don't know when we'll get confirmation, and if that's a state holiday, whether we're mandated to be closed that day as well. That would be 2 Mondays in a row to be closed.
Yeah, I don't know if they would do that, right? I mean, I know they're moving the race itself, but I don't know if the holiday is more tied to Patriots Day or to the race.
Right, and sometimes it's just a Suffolk County thing. So yeah. I think that could be something we need to wait on before we approve. I'm okay with leaving this as a draft and getting some answers. Maybe get creative with Patty and see if there's some alternatives that we can think about.
What were can I ask what the specific things that we think can get answers to in the next week or two would be?
If Patty, I think the question or the statement was, can we move voting locations out of schools for that day and find alternative voting locations? Is that correct, Megan?
Yeah, that's what I would like to know, especially given that I would anticipate that the turnout for the state primary would not be, I mean, of course, we need to give people ample places and time to vote, but it's not going to be what the November 3rd voting day is. And I know that, not all of our schools, and I can't exactly remember, I know NAB is not a location. Do we know of the others? Not every school is a voting location.
Robinson, Stony, Abbott.
Miller is.
Blanchard
is, right. So that is the question that I'd like to know is it possible to find enough other locations, be it town hall, PA, or wherever it is that we could move these voting precincts to? And then if I could just ask one more question. I saw that somebody asked about the September 4th half day carry. And said that given that we're, it's not a full 4-day weekend we typically have, that it is kind of disruptive to the school week that we just started, especially in light of the fact that we know our 7th, 8th, 10th, 11th, 12th graders don't in fact go back on the 2nd, they go back on the 3rd. So they're essentially having a day and a half. I know you said that was a conversation with the union, but contractually speaking, is that just sort of where we landed, and it was sort of a compromise? Is there, I guess my feeling about looking at that weekend is the half day really going to make a difference for people of whether they travel or not, or does it swing the pendulum the other way, that it's more beneficial to most students to not have that be a disruption in that day and a half or 3 days that they're in school, and have the full day that day? And if families need to travel, then they make that individual choice. But for the greater population of students, is it more beneficial to have the full day? And I think that was a question that a viewer asked.
And that's something that there's nothing prohibiting us from shifting that from an early release day to a full day. It was originally on there as a full. People wondered if that would be disruptive to vacation plans when people are assuming that's a 4-day week. So we put that in there in the case that people want to get a head start to wherever they're going. But if it's the will of the committee to make it a full day, you can absolutely switch it back to a full day.
I think there's enough questions, and Mr. Middlemiss is commenting again that apparently Charlie Baker says he will file legislation to make September 14th a state holiday just this year, just like Patriots Day. So that may be one that's to be determined.
One more
as
holiday.
I have to say I'm leaning towards not having that half day, because I think the kids who are starting Thursday, to have a day and a half, that's really not a whole lot of time to get settled. Is there a rationale that's easy to explain on the staggered starts? I know, is this a time that we want to keep that or not keep that?
I would advocate that we continue doing that. I think for particularly the 6th grade students entering middle school for the first time and the 9th grade students entering high school for the first time, I do think that it's a nice transition. We're always looking at how we can make our transitions from one school to the next smoother. And I do think that this is one nice thing that we have that can add to that. And, you know, I also think in particular, coming off of a unique year where the school year, again, possibly might have come to an abrupt halt altogether. I do think getting reassimilated back into school, not having those types of move up days that typically would take place in the spring, I think it would be nice to keep it the way it is and have those buildings available to just 6 and 9 the day early.
Agreed. I think at this point, I'd be more comfortable letting this be a draft and voting on it at the next meeting. Do I have any objections to that?
No.
Okay. So it's out there, the public can see it for very draft purposes in planning vacations that are not already planned at this time. Okay, so with that, we're going to move to warrants.
Ingrid, I'm sorry, Avery, before you move on, I'm just wondering if I could renege on not having an announcement and just add an announcement that I should have mentioned, but it slipped my mind earlier.
Of course.
I got a message from Jenny Kravitz, our 6 through 12 science coordinator, and she has learned that Lowell General Hospital is in desperate need for gloves. And we have about, she estimates about 2,000 at Westford Academy, and that we would be able to donate. And because the supplies are tax funded, we would need school committee's blessing to be able to move forward and do that. But it is something that even if we return to school, we could keep some aside, but we will not need the full amount. And we just think that that would be a nice way to contribute to this.
Sure. It was my understanding that our head nurse was working with Sandy Collins on getting any equipment that the schools had over to first responders and hospitals as needed. And if that's not happening because we need to vote, then I don't have a problem having a vote on that to get the equipment. I know that Jody said that there have been donations for our first responders. Is that?
I think to cover ourselves, why don't we just take the vote? I'm not sure what was happening in terms of the nursing supplies. This is a different bucket of supplies, but obviously the same type of thing, that it's taxpayer dollars.
Okay.
So maybe just to cover us.
Okay.
Ingrid, did you have any comment on that?
No, I think Carrie's right. I think it would be better if you want to do a more general vote, you know, and protective supplies, so it's not just specific on gloves. So if there are other things that, you know, we find that we can that we feel would help the effort, but that's up to you.
Does anyone want to make a motion to
Sure,
that?
I will. Motion to approve donation of any emergency or protective supplies to local healthcare facilities.
And maybe first responders.
And first responders.
I'll second that.
From the
Okay,
school
so
supply.
From the public school supply, correct. So we have 2 seconds. So a roll call vote would be Chris.
Aye.
Ming Chen.
Aye.
Gloria.
Aye.
Alicia.
Aye.
Megan.
Aye.
Sean.
Aye.
Aye. So that's a unanimous on approving whatever they need for us.
Thanks for bringing that, Carrie.
Thank you.
Chris, are you able to? So just so people know, the warrants, Chris is going to read them and we're going to approve them. Ingrid forwarded those to me and I will be signing them after tonight's meeting, after we vote, and getting those back to her. And she has arranged to get those to town hall. So everybody will get paid
Last time we asked about like e-signature, right? So is that being considered so that we don't have to actually physically sign it?
I'm the one who's signing. It's a signal signature. And right now I'm going to sign it and scan it back. I don't believe we have e-signature at this time.
Okay.
I'm still looking into it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that next time you don't really have to actually to get in touch with the documents.
Well, I just wanted, I might as well take the opportunity since Ingrid was good enough to provide our numbers to us, and that way you can approve it and I will sign it and get it back to her. Chris, do you want to read them?
Sure. Okay, motion to approve payroll warrant number 2039 SP dated March 26, 2020 in the amount of $2,030,916.16.
Second.
All in favor, roll call. Chris?
Aye.
Ming Chen?
Aye.
Gloria?
Aye.
Alicia?
Aye.
Megan?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous.
Motion to approve expense warrant number 2039 SE in the amount of $466,843.77.
Second.
All in favor, Chris?
Aye.
Ming Chen?
Aye.
Gloria?
Aye.
Alicia?
Aye.
Megan?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous. And the next item on the agenda, the minute.
Ingrid.
Oh, Ingrid.
I just wanted to give a shout out to our staff that both in our business office who are doing payroll and our expense warrants. As much as people are trying to do things remotely, they do have to physically come in and work in the office. And we're working very closely with Town Hall, who actually prints the checks. So they also have to come in. So we're trying to keep everyone safe and doing extra cleaning and such. But I just really wanted to shout out that, you know, their work is critical in getting all our employees paid and our vendors paid.
Thank you. And thank you to those still coming in and carrying on. The next item, the minutes, we're going to hold on those.
There is a question.
Okay. Oh, I'm going to hold on those and then we will answer the question. And we have a personnel update. Do you still have, Carrie, can you speak to that? Or, I mean, it's published, so I don't know if there's anything we want to touch on.
Can you unmute?
Unmute.
There were some replacements to resignations that had taken place or FMLAs. So you can take a look at that and just let me know if you have any questions.
Okay, and Carrie, before you mute back, if we don't return to school, how many high schooler projects such as capstones will be affected?
That is being discussed right now. Actually, Jim met with the advisors today to try to figure out what that might be. But I do know that he is committed to having some sort of culminating, exciting opportunity so that students end the year with a smile and great memories. But there may be some adjustments that have to be made.
Okay.
More to come on that.
And we are not adjourning to executive session. So I guess if there are no more questions, make sure there's no more public questions. We answered the capstone question. I don't see any more public questions. Are there any other committee questions?
Avery, are we meeting again next week?
That was my next question. My next thought before we adjourn is, would everyone, I feel that at this time it would be helpful to get the information out to the public once a week. So if we can do same time, same channel next week, I think the families are looking for this information. So I would be comfortable meeting every week. Yep, Megan.
And then, go ahead, Megan.
Sorry, just one quick question because I had to cut out and switch computers for a second. As far as reaching out to Patty to ask the questions about the voting, are we leaving that to you, Carrie, or were you hoping that one of the committee members was doing that? How are we approaching that to look into?
I have it down that I was going to be in touch with her to see what we could do. If there's somebody else who would prefer to do that, that's fine too. But I'm happy to do it.
Okay. I just didn't know where we left it.
Volunteering.
Is Megan volunteering?
I'm happy to. I just don't want to overwhelm you with the other things that you're doing. So I didn't know where we left it, but that's great.
If you're interested in doing that, Megan, then I think that that's terrific, and that would be a great help. So if you want to just start open the conversation with her, then we can connect after. But sure, if you don't mind reaching out, that works.
Okay, that's great. I'll reach out to her as well as the League of Women Voters, because I know that they obviously have had conversations with us about this in the past, and just sort of start the conversation and see where it goes and loop everybody in so that hopefully we can have an update for Monday.
Terrific.
Thank you for doing that, Megan. And don't forget, tomorrow night, the select board will be meeting virtually as well to hear on town updates.
So what would be the communication channel if there are any updates from the schools regarding like whether we're going to open on April 7th or not?
Yes, well, that will come from the superintendent through Blackboard Connect. I think that's where is that what your question is? Where will that communication come from? Mm-hmm. Yes, and we're actually, the commissioner hopes that by the end of this week, he will have that guidance on whether or not we are or the governor, but he said that information should be coming at the end of this week. So
okay, so
waiting, and we will send that out immediately. It'll probably come from the superintendent through Blackboard.
And then we would put that as a talking point next Monday night.
Absolutely.
Right.
Any other questions before I call to adjourn? And I'm happy to report, I think we had over 50 people logged in again tonight. So nice. Thank you, public, for joining us virtually. All right, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, Chris?
Aye.
Ming Chen?
Aye.
Gloria?
Aye.
Alicia?
Aye.
Megan?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you.
Go shovel your steps.
Yeah.
No, you don't.
We don't have to leave.
Because you don't have to go out of the house. So why bother, right? I'm just trying to do as little work as possible.
Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
All right.